Today, we're going to talk about a man who didn't just watch a century of change in India happen. He was one of its most powerful engines. His name was Dhondo Keshav Karve, but he came to be known as Maharshi Karve. And his life story is just an incredible lesson in what it takes to change the world. So let's just start with that big question. What does it really take to change a society's deepest, most ingrained beliefs? Is it about loud protests? Is it quiet persuasion? Or is it something else? Well, Karve's life gives us some pretty amazing clues.
All right, to really get the scale of Karve's work, you first have to picture the world he was born into. We're talking about a time with some serious barriers, especially for women. I mean, think about it. In the late 1800s, things like education, a professional career, even basic social freedoms, they were pretty much off the table for most women. These traditions were so deeply rooted that to even question them was seen as radical, maybe even impossible. And look, if things were tough for women in general, for widows, it was a whole other level of awful. They were often blamed for their husband's death, basically stripped of their identity, and completely shunned by society. Remarrying, that was a huge taboo. And it's this specific, cruel injustice that really lit a fire in Karve. So who was this guy? Who looks at a social structure that seems completely unmovable and just decides, yeah, I'm going to take that on? Let's get to know Dhondo Keshav Karve. First off, the man lived for 104 years. Just let that sink in. Born in 1858, way before India's independence, and he lived all the way to 1962. He saw the world change in ways we can barely imagine. But this wasn't just a long life. It was a life that was laser-focused on one thing: social reform. And this, right here, is what made him so different. Karve wasn't some activist who just talked a good game. His beliefs ran so deep that he was willing to challenge these traditions not just out in public, but in the most personal part of his own life. This was an act of unbelievable courage. You have to understand, in a society that treated widows as outcasts, here was Karve, a respected professor from a Brahmin family who deliberately chose to marry one. He wasn't just telling people what they should do, he was leading by doing, taking the social heat himself to prove his point. It says everything about his character. But, personal acts, no matter how brave, can only do so much. Karve knew that if he wanted to create change that would last for generations, he had to build actual institutions. And this is how he took that personal conviction and turned it into a public legacy. You can see his strategy so clearly here. It wasn't random, it was a progression. Step 1, change minds. He started by advocating for widow remarriage. Step 2, provide a safe haven. He created an orphanage for girls who had nowhere else to go. He also fought against harmful customs like the Devdasi practice. And then, the final brilliant move, he built a path to true freedom, higher education. This was a total game changer. The SNDTwomen's University, founded in 1916, wasn't just about handing out degrees. It was about giving women the tools and the confidence to be independent, to stand on their own feet, as he put it. This university was the crowning achievement of decades of his work. And the lengths he would go to, incredible. To raise money for this university, he literally traveled the world. Get this, in 1929, his journey even led him to a meeting with Albert Einstein. This shows you that Karve wasn't thinking small. He had a global vision for empowering women. So what's the lasting impact of a man who dedicated more than a century of his life to this cause? Well, the recognition he eventually received tells you a lot about that story. 104. That number isn't just about a long life. It represents a life that saw unimaginable change. And a huge chunk of that change was because of him. He didn't just start a movement, he lived long enough to see it completely reshape a nation. Towards the end of that very long life, the country he had worked so hard to change finally honored him in the biggest ways possible. First, in 1955, the Padma Vibhushan, which is one of India's highest civilian awards, and then, 3 years later, the biggest one of all. I mean, just think about that timing. In 1958, on his 100th birthday, the government of India gives him the Bharat Ratna. It was more than just an award. It was a national celebration of a century of life dedicated entirely to serving others.
Just an absolutely perfect tribute. And, you know, the public didn't just call him Mr. Karve. He became known as Maharshi Karve. That title, it means great sage. And it just perfectly sums up the deep reverence people had for his wisdom, for his sacrifice, and for his incredible vision for a better, more equal society. Which brings us right back to where we started. Karve's life is proof that one person's focused, lifelong dedication really can change a society. And it leaves us with a pretty powerful question to think about. As we look at our own world, whose traditions are worth challenging today?